Today, you are going to learn about a famous American woman whose work still helps people today, even though she died over 100 years ago. And that woman right there, her name is Clara Barton. First thing we need to talk about is where she's born. And it's in a very difficult state to pronounce for people who are learning English, but she's born in Massachusetts. Clara Barton was born on December 25th, 1821, in Massachusetts. And that is in the United States. Going to make this map bigger. And if you look at that white state where that arrow is pointing to, that is Massachusetts. And one of the most famous cities in Massachusetts is Boston. Massachusetts is not that difficult to pronounce. The important thing is, don't look, point that way. Don't look at the way it's spelt. Just look down here. Massachusetts. And then just say it really fast. Massachusetts. So here she's born in December 25th, 1821. Little baby Clara Barton. Very quickly, she is going to start helping people. That is going to be a theme of her life, is helping people. So already at age 17, she becomes a teacher. Clara's first profession was a teacher. She began teaching at age 17. Profession is a very fancy way to say job. Now, if you're in high school, you might get a job at a grocery store. It's probably not a profession. A profession is something that somebody does for a lifetime. Like maybe an older person, teaching is definitely a profession. Being a plumber is definitely a profession. So it's not just a job, but it is a fancy way to say job. The next thing she does is that she works at something called the U.S. Patent Office. This might be a new word for most people. A U.S. Patent Office is where you can get a patent. What the heck is a patent? Well, take a look right down there. The U.S. Patent Office is a place where people go to protect their new inventions or ideas so that other people cannot use them without permission. It gives the inventor special paper called a patent. And definitely when she worked at the U.S. Patent Office, they were giving inventors pieces of paper. And what it does is it says, okay, this person invented this. They can produce it, they can sell it. If somebody else tries to do the same thing, you can sue them. Like you can force them to give you the money that they made off your invention. She's going to start getting way more famous once the Civil War starts. Here's another picture of her maybe working at the patent office. You can see that there is a man. I don't know what invention that is. It looks like maybe an old-fashioned calculator, something we might call an abacus in English, but whatever. He invented that, and he doesn't want anybody to steal it, so it looks like Clara Barton is giving him a patent for that invention. But she's going to start getting really famous for helping soldiers during the Civil War. Now, you might hear American Civil War in the United States. We just call it a Civil War because we don't say American. It's just when you hear Civil War, the first thought is like our Civil War. Even though there are more civil wars around the world, there was the Spanish Civil War. There was a recent civil war in the country of Sudan. And a civil war is when one country fights against itself. In Sudan, there was such fighting, South Sudan won, and they became their own country in 2008. We will probably talk way more about the Civil War, but not in this lesson. This is just for Clara Barton. In the Civil War, there was the North versus the South. They fought mostly over slavery. The North won. So the South did not become its own country, even though it wanted to. So lots and lots of soldiers died, over 600,000. But Clara Barton was on the battlefield, and she was acting as a nurse on the battlefield, helping wounded soldiers. Now, AI made this. She is wearing plastic gloves. They did not have plastic gloves back in the Civil War. 2 photos of her, and it looks like the Civil War. From the pictures I've seen, those tents where the soldiers slept, they look pretty accurate. The uniforms that the soldiers are wearing, they also look pretty accurate. However, the medical supplies, not so much. So, what did Clara Barton do during the Civil War? Take a look right down there. She gave soldiers food, water, and medical supplies when they were wounded on the battlefield. So the battlefield is where the war takes place. It's where the battle is fought. And wounded, just in case you don't know what that word is, wounded is another way to say hurt. So not killed, luckily, even though many soldiers were killed, she helped wounded soldiers, right? But let's just be clear. Those plastic gloves, no, they did not exist. I'm pretty sure that Clara Barton did not use plastic gloves to treat wounded soldiers during the Civil War. AI is not perfect. Yeah, I'm working on some other lessons about historical things that happened in history, and I need to make sure, like, wait a second, they couldn't be wearing that watch during the 1920s. They didn't have a smartphone back then. Not perfect. But Clara Barton does get a nickname in the Civil War. Clara Barton got the nickname the Angel of the Battlefield. And I do think, let's just look at that for a second. I do think that artificial intelligence drew a beautiful picture here. They created this beautiful image of what looks like Clara Barton with angel wings and a crown or maybe a halo around her head. I do like the candles. I think it's beautiful, but they don't get everything right. Now, after the Civil War, lots of soldiers fought. As I said before, over 600,000 soldiers were killed. That doesn't mean that everybody went home happy. There were a lot of families waiting to hear from their soldiers, and it's possible they were prisoners for the other side, or maybe they were killed and people didn't know their identification. They couldn't find out like who this body belongs to and how to inform the family. So she's going to start an organization after the Civil War to try to help soldiers' families understand like their soldier was killed or their soldier was wounded and he's in a hospital right now. So her organization has gotten 63,000 requests for families looking to find their soldiers. And they were able to find more than 22,000 of these soldiers, both dead and alive. Now, I want to bring it to present day because there are two terms when you talk about war that you might hear in English, and that is MIA and POW. Those are both acronyms. When you hear acronym, it means there is a word, but those letters stand for something. So when we say MIA, if you look down below, today you might hear the term MIA. MIA stands for missing in action in English. So what might happen is that there is a soldier that goes off to battle and they're just like never heard from again. They're missing. The family, the government doesn't know where they are at. And now it's a little easier to identify soldiers because of something we call like DNA. But back then, it was not that easy. And Clara Barton, she was the leader of an organization that fought to find soldiers. And if a soldier is MIA, they've gone missing during combat and nobody knows where they are. Another thing you might hear, this is sad as well. A lot of things when you talk about war are sad, but you might also hear KIA, which means killed in action. So during the war, they were killed. And then yet another acronym you might hear is POW. Another acronym you might hear for soldiers in English is POW, which means prisoner of war. So they were fighting. The other side did not kill them, but they made them a prisoner. They put them in like jail until the war ends. POWs have been captured by the enemy, but not killed. All right, now we're going to fast forward. If you remember, the Civil War in the United States ended in 1865. Fast forward to 1898, Clara Barton is going to be involved in another war. And this war we call the Spanish-American War. So Clara Barton also helped in hospitals in Cuba in 1898. Why? Well, there was something called the Spanish-American War. We will talk about that briefly. Miss Barton was in Cuba because of the Spanish-American War. Now, just like that war sounds like, Spanish, that would be the country of Spain. American, that would be the country of the United States. Spain and the United States fought against each other in 1898. It was a quick war. It only lasted about 4 months. It was a short war, only lasting about 4 months. It officially began on April 25th, 1898, and ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris on December 10th, 1898. So a very quick war, but an important war for the United States. Because think about it. Just like 30 years before this, the United States was fighting against itself in the Civil War. They could not be a very powerful country. But just 30 years later, they start becoming a little more powerful. Spain was a very powerful country. Think about all of the other countries in the world that speak Spanish today. Well, Spain had a part of that. They conquered that part of the world. But by 1900 or so, the year 1900, the United States is getting more powerful. The United States won right down here. They gained territories from Spain, including Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. This was the beginning of the U.S. becoming a powerful force around the globe. Yeah, Spain was not as powerful as it once was, but with the United States defeating them, This would start the U.S. on its way to becoming one of the most powerful countries in the world. It's really after World War II in about 1945 when the U.S. would become its most powerful. Now, oh, here's a picture. Let me get rid of this. Again, AI made this, and I think this looks pretty accurate. It looks almost like soldiers, U.S. soldiers at least, fighting in the Spanish-American War. They probably carried guns very similar to this, and I think their uniforms looked a lot like this while fighting in the Spanish-American War. Now, this is what Clara Barton is most famous for. Clara Barton started the American Red Cross in 1881. And this is probably the reason we still talk about her today. A lot of people helped in the Spanish-American War. A lot of people helped soldiers in the Civil War. But there was only one person that started the American Red Cross, and this still helps people to present day, to today. We'll talk about her book here in a minute, but she was the leader of the Red Cross for 23 years. She never got married. She never had children. And we could talk about that a lot. We won't. This is trying to be a short lesson here, but she might have just been too busy helping others to settle down. We might use that phrasal verb, to settle down and find a husband and have children. She could have been just too busy. But 1907, she's going to write an autobiography. And this is a little girl, not Clara Barton, but a little girl reading Clara Barton's book. She wrote a book about her life. The title of the book is The Story of My Childhood. She wrote an autobiography in 1907. And maybe, I kind of hope, this little girl is reading that book and she's becoming inspired by Clara Barton. She's saying, I want to help people too. But we should talk, hang on, before we get to those fires, we should talk about what an autobiography is, because there are clues in that word. Auto means like by itself, automatically. Bio means life, and graph in English means writing. So, autobiography is a book about a person's life that they wrote themselves. Autobiography. Sadly, Clara Barton passes away. It's a nice way in English to say she dies. But not in a fire. We'll talk about that in a minute. This happens after she dies. But the American Red Cross still helps people. Clara Barton was 90 years old when she died on April 12th, 1912. Not easy to say, right? 12th. 6th. She died on April 12th, 1912. Even though Miss Barton is no longer alive, her work is still helping people today. How about this? California, big state. The earth is getting hotter, it's getting drier, and lately, every fall, after the long hot summer, there have been these wildfires in California where the forests will catch on fire, destroy thousands of acres of trees, probably millions of acres of trees, and also sometimes people's houses. When that happens, when a catastrophe happens, the American Red Cross is there. Over the last few years, wildfires have destroyed parts of California, and the American Red Cross was also there to help. What about big hurricanes? We've already talked about Puerto Rico once in this lesson. In 2017, Hurricane Maria devastated the island of Puerto Rico, and the American Red Cross was there to help with supplies, fresh water, and restoring internet and power lines. And you can see whenever the Red Cross is around, they will wear those like jackets, and it does have a red cross on it. But today, what the Red Cross is most famous for is that they host thousands of blood drives each year. They ask people to donate their blood, and that will be available when other people need it. So let's go back to that hurricane. If somebody is injured in that hurricane and they need blood, the American Red Cross has already asked people, donate your blood. So if people lose a lot of blood after an accident, their blood can be replaced. They do it safely. They test the blood. I think you have to be 18 to donate your blood, but I've done it several times and I will do it several times more. It's a good thing. Hope you have learned a little bit more about this lesson on Clara Barton. See you next time. Adios.